What's poppin', everyone? Adma here. So I want to start off this video by actually wishing you a happy new year. Welcome to 2020. I know that every new year people are like new year, new me, and they want to try out new things. So this year I have a feeling that there are some people that actually want to get into vlogging, maybe YouTube or Instagram, I don't know, anything at all that requires you to be videoing yourself this 2020. And you may be asking yourself, which smartphone can I get that is cheap, that can actually do a very decent job recording me and also keeping up with my day-to-day tasks? Now, when I'm making this list, I'm going to assume that you don't have a lot of money in your budget. So you're looking for a cheap phone that doesn't have a heavy price tag, produces good video, and can also just handle your basic day-to-day tasks. If you're someone that's actually looking for a second phone to add to the one that you already have, I don't think this list is for you, because if you have enough money to buy a second phone in addition to what you already have, why not just get a higher end phone? Why not just sell the other one you have, add a bit more money, and get a higher tier phone than the ones I'm going to recommend here? Well, that's just my thoughts. Of course, all of the phones that I'm going to talk about, I'll leave links to their respective reviews that were done on other channels in the description below, so just go there and you will get what you need. So now let's actually talk about the best video cameras in smartphones for YouTube in 2019. Now, there's no how you actually talk about budget video cameras or budget phones without talking about Xiaomi. So I'm actually going to talk about Xiaomi first. Now, there were two phones I was actually looking into when I was looking into Xiaomi: the Xiaomi Redmi Note 7 and the Xiaomi Mi A3. Now, the Xiaomi Redmi Note 7 is a pretty interesting phone. I'm going to talk about the cameras first. This isn't a review, so I don't need to go over every single detail in the phone. Now, it comes with a 48 megapixel camera or a 5 megapixel depth sensor. There are also some other variants that come with 12 megapixel main cameras and 5 megapixel and 2 megapixel depth sensors. It records 1080p footage at 30 frames per second and has electronic image stabilization. Now, if you don't know what electronic image stabilization is, just take it that if you're walking with your phone, your video will be shaky, but it won't be extremely shaky because it's trying to digitally make it look steady. Just keep it like that. Now, I've already said that it records in 1080p, and this phone costs about 50,000 to 70,000 naira, depending on the specs you get inside. You can get about 32 gigs of ROM and 3 gigs of RAM, or 64 gigs of ROM and 4 gigs of RAM. It all depends on you. Overall, I'll have to say that this phone will serve you well because it has a Snapdragon 660, a 14 nanometer process chip. So basic day-to-day tasks will be handled very well, and with 3 or 4 gigs of RAM, you shouldn't have too much of a problem. Now, another thing that will actually come into play when you're talking about video, apart from stabilization, colors, color accuracy, so on and so forth, is actually storage. So for YouTubers that are just starting up, I normally recommend that you record in 1080p, but then you downscale to 720p. It just makes your 720p footage a bit more crisp. It's just a little bit more crisp than normal. So it's just my advice. You can still record in 1080p if you want. If you're recording video of course takes a lot of space in storage. So you need to actually have a lot of storage. Now, this phone already comes with about 64 gigs of internal storage, or 32 gigs of internal storage. Is it expandable though? Yes. Yes. Well, the thing is that if you want to expand your storage on this phone, you actually have to use up your SIM 2 slots. And you can increase your storage up to 256 gigs. Now, if you're recording, say, tech YouTube videos, that should be around 10 to 20 minutes, roughly, which is about 3 to 4 gigs per video. So, if you want to use just your phone's internal storage, I wouldn't really recommend that because it's not a very good idea, but I think it's better you use the 64 gig variant. At least when you're done and you've uploaded your video, you can actually delete the raw file, or rather the unedited files, and then record new ones again. For those of you that actually want to keep the original files, you can find some storage medium, or you can just back it up to a cloud storage service. That's totally up to you. Now, the second phone that I actually wanted to look at is the Xiaomi Mi A3, which was announced later on in 2019. It costs about 70k with 4 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of internal storage. It can record up to 4K, but it doesn't have stabilization. So the Xiaomi Mi A3 has a 48 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensor. Now, I have to say, this camera is a bit more versatile, and if you are asking me which of these two phones I'd actually tell you to pick, I'd actually tell you to go for the Xiaomi Mi A3 because it has a more versatile camera system. It can record up to 4K, so if you record in 4K and you actually bring it down to 720p, your footage will look glorious. Like, it will look absolutely glorious. And still, a 48 megapixel camera along with Xiaomi's video processing will actually go a very long way in making you look good in your videos. But the problem is, if you're recording in 4K, it doesn't have any form of stabilization, so you have to actually leave your phone on a tripod, or you just try to be like very, very steady. That covers Xiaomi. Now, I actually looked into Samsung to see whether any of their budget phones of last year were actually any good, and yeah, I could say so. The Samsung Galaxy A20 has a 13 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, no depth sensor unfortunately, and no optical zoom lens. So if you're it's almost like as though this phone was made for video, because it has a normal 28 millimeter wide lens and an ultra wide lens, which is pretty wide. Like, it's very, very wide. Actually, you can get like a very, very large amount of stuff into your frame. So if you're making videos where you're doing interviews with 1, 2, 3 people, then you can actually use the Samsung Galaxy A20 because of that ultra wide lens. You can also use the Xiaomi Mi A3, but then the Xiaomi Redmi Note 7 doesn't have an ultra wide lens, so it's more for people who are doing tech videos like me. So you're just recording only yourself and you move on from there. Now, the Samsung Galaxy A20 comes with 32 gigs internal storage and 3 gigs of RAM, and it records at 1080p 30 frames per second with no stabilization. So that means if you're using this phone, you're definitely getting a tripod for sure. There is one thing in it that actually gets my attention, which is the ability to upgrade your storage up to 1 terabyte, and it has a dedicated slot, so you don't need to sacrifice your second SIM card for that. So if you now want to record a lot of video files, you can actually do that, and you don't need to worry about deleting it if you don't have the means of uploading or backing up to cloud storage mediums. That's that, but then you have to get the money to buy an SD card that's actually that large. So it's totally up to you. Now the next phone I actually checked was the Samsung Galaxy A30. Now that one has a 16 megapixel main camera and a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera. Now 16 megapixel is a higher megapixel count, but it's just the same camera software between these two phones. So video from the two of them should actually look the same. And they both also have 32 gigs of internal storage and 3 gigs of RAM. But then the Samsung Galaxy A30 also has 4 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of internal storage, with the micro SD card slot that is upgradable up to 1 terabyte. So that's pretty good. Now their chipsets, on the other hand, are 14 nanometer process chips, which are pretty good. They're not up to Snapdragon standards as of 2019, but they still do pretty well, and they will handle your basic day-to-day tasks like beasts. So you don't need to worry about using these phones. If you ask me which one of these two phones you'd want to get, I tell you, actually go with the Samsung Galaxy A20. I know that it has like smaller storage and that kind of thing, but it's cheaper and you can upgrade the storage with that extra bit of money that is remaining, and then you get very good footage, and you may still have some more change left over to buy something like mic or lighting or anything like that. But now we move into Huawei territory. Now I know that some people may actually have disparities about Huawei because of the Google ban and so on, but then these phones I'm talking about were already released before the Google ban, or they had already gotten their Google services before their license was taken from them. So the first phone I look at is the Y7 Prime 2019. Now it has a 13 megapixel main camera and a 2 megapixel depth sensor. This phone sort of reminds me of the Xiaomi Redmi Note 7. It's not a very versatile camera system, to where you're just getting a normal camera, and it's best for recording only yourself, or maybe just you and another person, but never 3 or more. I just think your footage will look a bit bad if you try to do that. So there's that, and it has 32 gigs of internal storage and 3 gigs of RAM. The chipset, on the other hand, is, well, it's a bit controversial if you ask me. It comes with a Snapdragon 450, which is also a 14 nanometer process chip, but the Snapdragon 400 series is not really the best for 2019. So if you're getting this phone, just know that you're not supposed to push it as much, because it's not as powerful as, say, the Snapdragon 660 or something like that. The other phone I checked was Y9 2019, comes with a 13 megapixel main camera as well, and a 2 megapixel depth sensor. What's the difference? It has 64 gigs of internal storage or 3 gigs of RAM, and then it takes that 64 gigs of internal storage and bumps it up to 128 gigs of internal storage with 6 gigs of RAM. You can also get a 4 gig RAM variant if you look around in the markets. So it also has the cons of not being able to record so many people, and you have to just record only yourself. But then, of course, that's one thing. Both record in 1080p, but then the Y7 Prime 2019 actually has electronic image stabilization, which is it's just a leg up over the Y9 2019. I don't know why the Y9 2019 doesn't have electronic image stabilization, at least. But then the Y9 2019 also beats the Y7 Prime in its chipset. It uses the Kirin 710, not the 710F that you find in the Y9 Prime 2019 or Y9S. It's just a stepped down version of that, but it's a 12 nanometer process chip, which means it's more battery efficient and it will last pretty well for you. So when you're trying to record, or rather when you're trying to start up YouTube, your video camera and your audio are the two most important things. Now, these if you want to actually use your phone as a microphone, most of these phones I've called here have dedicated mics with noise cancellation too, and also record in stereo sound, so you don't need to worry about that. But then I wouldn't recommend you using your smartphone to actually do audio recording. I'd recommend you get a lav microphone, but then you have to look on other channels to actually get some ideas on lav mics to buy. But then that's my hint for you. If you're starting off YouTube, just start with a lav mic, especially if you're recording only yourself. If you're recording more than 1 or 2 people, well, I then think a shotgun mic is best for you. But I'm not here to tell you about audio. I'm just here to tell you about smartphones that will actually get you good video performance while also giving you good day-to-day life usage. Well, that's actually been it for my list. Let me know in the comment sections below what you think. Do you have any other recommendations for phones that should be there? Let me know in the comment sections below. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.